Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Liza Long. I'm from the College of Western Idaho, and I'm assistant professor of English. And I'm so grateful to be here today to speak with you and share some fun projects that my students and I have been working on with artificial intelligence, textbook creation, and teaching with AI in the classroom. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm so grateful to be living and working on the beautiful ancestral homelands of the Shoshone, Paiute, and Bannock tribes. And I think every day about my duty and my part in reconciliation. I was really really honored to hear our keynote speaker this morning and what he shared about our obligations to social justice and equity. So let's dive into it. I've got some learning outcomes for you, and I'll share a little bit more about myself and my background in a minute. But first, these are some things I'm hoping we can get through today, some of it with a little help from you. So I'm going to share some opportunities to use ChatGPT in lesson planning and content creation, specifically a textbook. We'll explore assignments that use ChatGPT to enhance student reading and writing. Hoping we can understand the limitations of ChatGPT. Any of us who've worked with it know this. Develop a syllabus policy for the use of ChatGPT. This has become absolutely critical. And then teaching the transferable skill of prompt engineering to students. Finally, creating assignments that will encourage students to use critical thinking skills and their own writing skills. So I had to add this picture. This is one of my students, Caleb Cherigi, and he drew this picture after our first day of class when I let students know that we were going to be embracing artificial intelligence and learning together. And really, what I'm sharing today has been my learning opportunity that I took on because if you were like me, in November 2022, when ChatGPT was announced, you probably thought, oh my goodness, what does this mean for me and my job? And I have been working with ChatGPT almost daily since that time. I've watched it change and grow, as many of you have. But I do think that the advent of these new generative AI tools, both in art and in writing, really are forcing educators to think about what we are teaching our students and how we can make sure that they're prepared for the job market that they'll be entering with a lot of changes. So that's what drove me as an English professor to consider how to use these tools in English 211. So I have to start with a note about the ethics of artificial intelligence. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So I acknowledge that ChatGPT does not respect the individual rights of authors and artists and ignores concerns over copyright and intellectual property in its training. Additionally, I acknowledge that the system was trained in part through the exploitation of precarious workers in the global South. In this presentation, I specifically use ChatGPT to assist with image design, create survey questions, and respond to sample prompts. And I'd like to share a few links with you in the chat, both the link to this presentation so you can follow along if you're like me. And then I'm also going to share this ethics acknowledgement statement that I came across as I was wrestling with the ethics concerns associated with ChatGPT. And I've written an essay about this that I'll also share in the chat. And this is an essay I assigned to all my students at the beginning of the semester, and I assign it for a few reasons. First, to let them know that I know about this tool, right? Second, to let them know that I spend a lot of time using this tool. And third, to let them know that it's okay to feel uncertain and maybe even a little scared and definitely ethically conflicted about generative artificial intelligence. Because I will tell you, I don't know how your students have been, but my students have been looking to me for guidance. So in part wrote this essay as I grappled with my own concerns and my own fears. And when my students ask me what my biggest fear is, they think I'm going to say that it'll take my job because I am a writer and an English professor. But what I'm really afraid of, candidly, and you can read about it in my essay, is climate change. So that's a big concern that I have in thinking already about the equity issues associated with climate change. So I'll encourage you to read this blog post from Lori Phipps and Donna Landclose and maybe consider, if you are using AI and you aren't already including an acknowledgement statement, that just as we do land acknowledgements, I think it's important for us to be mindful about the effects of this new tool that's been unleashed on all of us. So, while I introduce myself, I would also like to know a little bit more about you and where you are with AI. I'm going to put this link in the chat, and this is just a quick, anonymous Google Forms survey. If you all could just take a few minutes and fill that out really quickly, I'll share a little bit about myself, and then we'll look at you and see where you're at on some of these issues. So, as I mentioned, I'm an assistant professor at the College of Western Idaho. We are a 2-year open access community college, and we serve everyone from students, traditional students just out of high school, to very non-traditional students who are retraining for a new job or a new career. I am a former Idaho State Board of Education OPAL fellow, and I was a mentor. That's how I initially became acquainted with the open community. And I got to present in 2020 with two of my other OPAL fellows, Joel Glad and Amy Minervini, about our open platform modular resource that we developed for the state of Idaho's English 101 and 102 composition classes. So I've been teaching and working with OER since 2020. Before that, I didn't even know what open education was. And since then, I've just been so grateful, I guess, to be able to connect with an amazing community like those of you who are here today. I've been a consultant for Rebus. We've heard about Rebus in a few presentations today, and I'm working with some fantastic faculty in the Maryland Community College system right now. So that's me and my professional experience with open ed. So then there's artificial intelligence. And I think the first thing that I discovered when working with AI is that I write like a robot. So I'm assuming everyone here has probably heard of GPT-0, the checker for artificial intelligence. And you know what, y'all? These things don't work. They target English language learners disproportionately, which is a horrifying thing to me and which I've witnessed firsthand. But for whatever it's worth, I actually write like one, because when I put my own writing into GPT-0, I'm flagged as AI most of the time. And then I thought, well, maybe this is because, thanks to The Atlantic, I now know that my book is one of the ones that GPT trained it. Well, it wasn't GPT, because this is the book's 3 data set. We don't know what OpenAI is using, but probably a similar data set, right? So this discovering that my book was one of the books that was used to train the data sets was a sobering feeling. And if some of you are authors and you haven't checked yet, you should definitely check, and chances are very good that you were used without your permission. And I bring that up within the context of open education because, again, I'm passionate about open. Everything that I write and share is licensed Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. I really want people to remix and reuse my work, but it's still sobering when you find out that your own work was taken without your consent, right? And that was the experience I had when I learned this. So yeah, so that's our lovely AI news. So I'd like to take a look now and see who you are. And I'm just going to share this screen really quickly. Sorry, as I move back and forth. Are you all able to see the responses that we got? Perfect. So it looks like we have a lot of professors and instructors, a lot of librarians and OER production support. I'm glad to hear that. Librarians have been absolutely integral to my own work with OER. We have a few students, wonderful. I'll be talking about how my students have been used in helping to create OER for this class today. And instructional education designers. Well, great. Well, it's wonderful to have you here. And it looks like overall, we feel pretty experienced. Let's see, 5 being most, well, maybe not as experienced. So if I'm reading this right, then you're here today because you really do want to learn more. You want to learn more about how you could possibly use AI in your classroom. I've been using it since last spring term, and then very deliberately in this class that I'll share. So I hope you do leave with some ideas, at least, about ways that you might incorporate artificial intelligence. Scott, I just want to address your comment, because that is 100% what that ethics statement says. It says, I know this is wrong and I'm doing it anyway. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I do occasionally get to teach ethics classes here, and this is a very interesting case use for ethics. In fact, just to be clear, when I get into the work that I give students, I do not require my students to use artificial intelligence. I have an opt-out for every assignment that we use that's designed for AI, and I feel very strongly about that. We've had other people incorporating AI assignments at our college who want to make all students do these assignments, and I don't think that's right. I think that there are very real ethical concerns. So thank you for acknowledging that, Scott. Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, I fly on airplanes too, you know. So yeah, no, I can't, and you can read my essay more for how I'm grappling with it, but it's if you are uncomfortable ethically with this tool, there are plenty of reasons to be ethically uncomfortable. And I kind of asked about that, and I noticed that that is the big concern, right? I'm not surprised. Those of you who are familiar with AI, did you catch that I had AI write this survey for you? Could you tell? That's one of the case uses that I use AI for a lot now. If I just need some kind of administrative thing, I ask ChatGPT and I say, "Hey, write this for me." And it took it took like seconds to generate this survey. So this is what ChatGPT thinks you ought to be concerned about, just in case you're wondering, right? And it looks like what you are concerned about, yes, you are concerned about the same things that I was concerned about, mainly the ethical dilemmas, which I'm not, aside from telling you that they are there and giving you some tools to think about them, and saying that you need to have your students think about it. I'm using it, right? So what I'm going to show you today is using it. And then the loss of critical thinking skills, that's the other thing that for me as an instructor, I was really concerned with. So I'm glad to see that those are concerns for you too. And then I also wanted you to think, and yes, the ChatGPT wrote this too. What are some opportunities that you can use with generative AI? And personalized learning, I do want you to think about that, because one way that I'm using it is to provide formative feedback to students in real time in the classroom in ways that I, as an English instructor who teaches a 5-5 load, can't necessarily do for every student, right? So I'm seeing a lot of success with some personalized learning, efficiency and time saving. Y'all, what I'm going to show you is an OER textbook that I co-wrote, and it really is absolutely a co-writing process that I am co-writing and teaching this semester. And I'm going to tell you, when you see the textbook, it's not the greatest thing in the world. It's the first time I'm teaching it, but it's been great for my students. And there's simply no way that I could have written this textbook without the assistance of artificial intelligence in the time frame that I had. And I'm glad to see that maybe global collaboration is something we're thinking about too, and innovative teaching methods. I hope to share a few of those. So I'm just checking chat really quickly because there's so Sky. Oh, good. We have all. Okay, that ChatGPT did not actually do that one. I should make it clear. I did have to add that because so like this was just a quick aside back to the climate change thing. I had been following Bitcoin for a while and knew just like the tremendous amount of computing power and climate resources Bitcoin was taking. And so I was curious. I thought, well, surely these large language models are similar, in terms of their resources. I could not get ChatGPT or any other large language model to admit that climate change was one of the potential ethical concerns. I had to do real old school gumshoe research to track that down. And I have some statistics in the essay that I shared on this. And yes, it is a real concern. But then when I finally pinned ChatGPT down, I said, well, you've got to acknowledge this is a real concern. It said, well, yes, but large language models are going to solve that. They're going to solve climate change. So have to hold them to it, folks. We'll see if that's true. Well, thank you for sharing your responses. That helps me to kind of get a feel for where you are. So, and I have to remember, as with any teaching context, this is something that I've really been living, breathing, and working with. So I'll check the chat, especially when I get into demoing some of this stuff. I'll take a pause and remember to check the chat and see if there are questions as we go along, because some of this stuff might be very new and strange to you, or you might have ideas that we could share out with the whole group. So with that, let's get into it. When I asked you where you were with artificial intelligence, I used this image in the essay I shared. This will call out my Gen Xers. Where are my Gen Xers who remember 1985 Val Kilmer movie, Real Genius, right? Which one of my favorite scenes, running gag throughout the movie, is the students coming to class, and then one day a student's not there and sends a tape recorder in, and then and gradually it grows to the point where the professor just has a tape recorder running to the tape recorders. So when you all mentioned you were concerned about critical thinking, this was one of my big concerns as a teacher as well, right? And also the idea that Matthew Kirschbaum brought up in the Atlantic of the text apocalypse, right? Like, what is writing even for if if AI is writing all our emails and then reading all our emails? Why are we writing emails? Why are we writing anything? So it seems like you guys are kind of where I am too. And what I decided was, no, this could actually be a really cool new tool. It could help with equity, or it could hurt with equity. But the way that I've seen it help with equity, we do teach a large number of English language learners at the College of Western Idaho. And one almost immediate use that I brought into the classroom was working one-on-one with students. If standard American English is what we value, well, here's a tool that just leveled the playing field, right? So students can have their great ideas, they can express their ideas really well. And I'm not an instructor who ever graded on standard American English. I don't care whether all that stuff was really great or not. But at this point, if employers care, if somebody does care, we do have a tool that just kind of levels that playing field entirely. Students, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold too. So students do have the opportunity to use it in that way. So the class that I'm going to share and the case study I'm going to share is my English 211 class. This is kind of a niche class, but it's one to show how you as a subject matter expert might be able to leverage artificial intelligence in creating content and assignments, but also how you might bring students into that experience as well. So this is a class that's required for all of our majors. I usually have between 16 and 22 students in the class. I run it every fall and every spring. It's a high flex model where students can either attend in person or they can attend fully online. I've taught it that way for a while. It's worked really well. And my goal, I've known since I got into open education that I wanted to replace my textbook. And it was a good textbook. If any of your English folks, it was Stephen Lynn's Text and Context, worked really great. I had all my classes outlined around that textbook and it worked fine. But I had some issues with it. One thing that obviously is expensive, like this book is it's a paperback, and it's around $85 for my students. So that was a real concern, especially at our open access community college. Another concern I had is it was very Western centric. And then a third concern I had was that it just really didn't include a lot of more recent and current scholarship or thought. So like there's not even a section in this book on post-colonial studies, which I think in 2023 is probably an issue. So I wanted to address these things to create a more open, diverse, inclusive resource. And these are some ways I've used it, and I'm going to demo the book for you with the full disclosure that I'm one of those people who, like our keynote speaker said this morning, is always happy to build stuff while, build it from the ground up while I'm doing it. So I am writing this book, teaching this book at the same time, and it's very much a work in progress. In fact, I was hoping my deadline of November 7th would mean it was done, but it's not. I still have 2 chapters to go. So, but I don't have to teach them till later, so I'm in good shape, right? So I want to demo it, and then this is where you might have some questions or ideas, and then we'll kind of debrief some things that we've learned. So you should be seeing Critical Worlds. Jonathan Lashley thinks this cover should be a mock-up or something, but I like it. I created it in PowerPoint. I think it's fine. Anyway, that might not be the permanent one. So in this book, I had already started writing it when ChatGPT came out. And what I realized was, as I started playing with ChatGPT, this could really help me with some basic things. So if you're a subject matter expert, you're going to be able to evaluate the output of generative AI pretty quickly, right? And it can do some basic administrative type writing, like background writing, that type of thing very quickly for you. So you basically start with a draft much faster than you might if you were generating that same work on your own. And also, the other thing I was able to do in leveraging AI, in fact, I don't have a link to this in the chat, but I'm going to put it just in case you guys aren't aware of Otter AI yet. I was able to use Otter AI to upload videos of my already existing classroom presentations and lectures. And it's called Critical Worlds. Thank you for asking. Let me put the link to this book in the chat too, so you guys can kind of play along. That would be helpful. So this is the book that I'm demoing right now, and it's My Literary Criticism. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's right here. So anyway, I thought, as I was doing this, I thought, well, I can really bring ChatGPT in, and Otter AI, if I upload my recordings of my lectures, then it can create an instant transcript, which gives me kind of a starting place for a lot of what I was creating. I also wanted the book to be accessible in a lot of different ways to help students be able to access the content in different ways. So I included I've been including those video lectures as well. So students have the content that they can read using Pressbooks. And then they've also got the video content that reinforces the knowledge. So I made a note in here that as I was writing it, this is when ChatGPT came on the scene. And what I decided was that I could use this tool to learn along with my students, right? So I wanted to see what ChatGPT could do, so I would know if my students were using it. And what I found from my students is when they were using it, they really wanted guidelines. They wanted to know about the ethics. They wanted to know how they could ethically use or responsibly use this tool and what would be pushing the boundaries. They wanted to know what skills were most important for them to learn. So as I was learning along with them with this new technology, being a subject matter expert on my own content field enabled me then to evaluate a lot of the output that ChatGPT was sharing so that we could have those kinds of conversations. Another concern, and this is tangential, but those of you who work in the space with literature know that a concern with OER, especially in literature, is having more modern texts. So I have worked with one of our librarians, Jason Roach, to basically make my case for fair use on the text that I'm using, going with maybe the Pressbooks definition that I'll ask for forgiveness. So if I get a cease and desist, I'll have to change some of this up, but I've acknowledged all of the work that I've done. So that's my OER statement that I wanted to show you. And then let's see what a chapter, I'm going to move down into a more recent chapter so we can kind of see what this looks like. I think the reader response theory is a fun one. So if we go to reader response, and my students know I've done this, I've used Adobe Firefly to create little images for the beginning of each. I have a Firefly link to those of you who haven't used Firefly. They claim that they have the content user's permission for their data set that they've trained on. That's the claim that they're making. So I feel a little better using them than I might using others. So every chapter, this will show you kind of how the hybrid thing works. Every chapter is formatted in the same way. And a lot of this introductory background stuff was originally drafted by ChatGPT. And I've shared all of the links to all of the chats that I've had. So if you really want to drill down into what this looks like, I can show you the reader response one in a minute. That will be really, I think, helpful for you to think about how this works. So a lot of this was drafted by ChatGPT. And then when I say drafted, I came in and put my own voice in there, thought about what was important, added some quotes, added some research. The learning objectives are just to align with our course outcomes. Then this obviously is not by ChatGPT, and I found this myself. Like these AI tools are still not super great at finding research. So I brought in some scholarship that I wanted them to read. Some of this was written by ChatGPT and some was written by me, right? So again, it's very much a hybrid approach. Some of this was written by ChatGPT, some was written by me, and some of this, but not all of it. So I'm bringing in my own, I'm basically having ChatGPT draft it. Then I'm bringing in the text. I chose this text, not ChatGPT. I actually wrote these questions, but sometimes I have ChatGPT write the questions. I'll feed it the text and say, hey, what are some things we could explore? And sometimes I write these thesis statements, sometimes ChatGPT does, but I'm always checking it, right? So I think I had I'll have to double check the chat, but I think I had ChatGPT think of these reader response questions. And then the limitations, again, is a very co-written element. So for the reading, I provided that myself. The next thing is what I thought was super fun, and I'm having my students do this type of thing too. With their own essays. So I decided I wanted to have ChatGPT write essays about, I use the canonization by John Donne because it's a hard poem. And so it's the same one for every chapter. ChatGPT writes the essay for me. And then in this particular case, ChatGPT, I asked it to do subjective reader response, and it did a horrible job because it's a large language model. It's just predicting stuff. So I was like, well, that didn't work very well. And I'm just kind of carrying that on for students. I said, okay, I'm going to have to create a prompt. I have to create a character to write this essay. So that's what I did. I created a character in my prompt, and the character wrote the essay about his girlfriend, right? So then it's more of a subjective reader response. And then I had, what I did is I came in and annotated, and I do this for every critical lens, every essay ChatGPT writes, the stuff in yellow are my comments on what it wrote, and I bold things that I like when it's using phrases that I would want to see students use in their own critical essays, and then I use the blue for a thesis statement. So this has been actually a really fun exercise, and I did it for both receptive and subjective reader response. This was a great way for me to kind of test what these tools could do, right? And then I'm also showing the students how to push back, how to be thinking critically about the output of ChatGPT. Then they practice this in the classroom as well, both prompting and then criticizing. So, citing stuff, yes, Maina, I'll share that. I do have a lot of stuff about citing, so I'll share that with you. This is the other thing that I really wanted to share out, and I've presented at Open Ed on this before, but we think a lot about how to involve students in publications. And so I want to share, this is their end goal for this class. They create this beginnings and endings critical edition. And here's an example. This one, we'll have even more of these. This is an example of a student acknowledgement statement. That I'll pull over for you so you can see it. So this student, what I'm having my students do is write, if they use ChatGPT at all, they write an acknowledgement statement that explains how they used it. And that can be one aspect of citing, but I'll show you how MLA cites it too, so that you can see. And I actually need to add my citations. I just had links. This is again where I'm just like not quite done with this book yet. So here's the student example again. We go through that. Then they have practicing reader response criticism. I actually wrote this part. This is co-written. The poems I choose myself. The questions I sometimes write, or sometimes ChatGPT writes them. And again, the whole process will be transparent. I'll show you the ChatGPT conversation. I want to wrap up pretty soon. So that's basically the book. And I want to get to an activity where you guys can do something. Let me just show you really quickly what a chat might look like for me. And again, I'm not an expert. This is basically how I've learned this, right? So at the very end of my book, I have links to, and I've included the prompts. So here are all the prompts that I used to create that reader response. And you can see I didn't use all of them. ChatGPT was awful at providing biographies. I had it write my own biography at one point, and it like said I was from Pocatello, and I am not from Pocatello. So it just makes things up, right? But it did get pretty good at a lot of these other things, like coming up with questions. So you can see that was this is all one long chain. And here's my prompt about the subjective reader response. What I like is it learns, right? So it knows that every conversation in this context is about reader response. I don't have to re-educate it or retrain it every time on that. So like, I think seeing these, and again, that's just at the very end of the book when you're there, it's just a list of every chat that I had with ChatGPT, and I deliberately used 3.5. I wanted to use the same tool that my students would likely be using. So in doing this exercise, I was basically turning myself into a potential student, right? One other aspect of this that I want to show you really quickly is a student assignment. So back to reader response. When they're practicing reader response criticism, I mentioned in class, we'll do the sample essays, which is fun, and we talk back to it in class. But they also have the option where did I put it? Oh, it's at the end of, sorry, I had to think, where is that? It's at the end of the chat of the model essay. So they have the option in that model essay of practicing the prompt engineering as well. At the very end of every chapter is a little blue box that says, hey, you try it. So they can go into ChatGPT or another generative AI program and try to create an essay themselves. And then these are things that we can talk about in class. So that's been really fun for them. I think they've enjoyed doing that. The final thing I wanted to share with you is this my essay feedback. This is Stephen Keen or Eric Keen, I'm sorry, out of the University of, or Washington State University. I'll get it all wrong. It's a tool that we're using in this class to provide those formative feedback as students go. So what are the opportunities and limitations? I thank you for letting me demo that and go through it. And I've had a couple of questions. Oh, yes, you asked, did you use 4? Now, I stuck with 3.5 deliberately because I wanted to use what my students would likely be using. But students can use 4, just so you all know, if they have the Edge browser, the Bing chat is powered by ChatGPT 4. So you can use that. And this is something that I want to start playing around with in the same class. Like, deconstruction is hard, y'all. So if I can train a Bing chat sidebar to kind of do help them like be a little reading assistant on the side, I think that's going to really benefit my students. So, advantages and disadvantages. I have a link to, if you guys want to see. This is like, that's the biography. ChatGPT made up a whole book that I never wrote. So I guess I know what my next book is called. That's my biography that ChatGPT wrote. So so I think that like there's some great opportunities here. Obviously, there's no way I could have written a textbook completely by myself doing a chapter every week at that level of complexity, right? It is a survey course, but it's still fairly complicated information. So it's great for outlining. I have students use it in English 102 as well to outline papers. It can analyze text. In my chats, you'll see I fed it the text every time, and it can analyze it and look for patterns. It sometimes gets things wrong, so you definitely have to check it there, but it's really helpful. Limitations, hallucinations in 3.5 continue to be a problem. I did put an asterisk next to limitations, though, because what we are seeing is that this tool is changing in real time, right? So what may be a limitation today might not be a limitation tomorrow. Then we have to come back, well, obviously back to ethics, the built-in biases, they are real, and you will experience them if you play with the tool at this level. And then the student learning piece is still really a tough one for me. So the exercises I showed you, you can see I'm really trying to reinforce our very human skills of critical thinking. That's what concerns me. And I tell my students that up front. I say, I know when this tool is wrong. How do you know? How will you get to the point where you will know whether this tool is giving you good information? So yeah, I see a few things in the chat with hallucinations. Yes, the quotes. Here's a fun one. Here's a fun link to a chat where it completely, this was early on, right? So I'm learned. That's the other fun thing. If you look at my chats, I'm clearly learning. I'm getting better and better as I go on with prompt engineering. So I've been very transparent about that with students as well, that you're not always super good at this right away. But the chat that I just shared is the advantages and disadvantages of new criticism. And it just made up articles for me. And then I would say, well, no, I want some with websites. And it would, sure, here's all of them are made up. They're all made up sources. So it's very fun that way. And then I included this picture. I love seeing AI in the wild. And I use this as an example for my students too, because when we don't know how to think critically about AI, this is from a website that was just thrown up very quickly. It's clearly, it's for some cheap little engraving tool that's probably manufactured in China. And this is obviously the whole website's written by AI, and this is the result when we asked AI to produce an image of American crafters. And if you know anything about the American crafting community, they look a little more like me, not really like this. So back to critical thinking, giving your students chances to find that kind of stuff, I think is great. I do want to share, I know syllabus policies was something I promised I would do, and I've got my syllabus policy here. It's also included in Lance Eaton's amazing crowdsourced document that has a wide variety from use AI for any reason to no, you can't use AI at all. So mine is somewhere in the middle, right? Like if you use it, you need to cite it. But I think it's important, and this is where I'd love for you to start putting your ideas for assignments. Now that you've seen kind of what I'm doing, how could you maybe use this tool either to create content or to create assignments or to have students create assignments? And one important idea that I think we should keep in mind is we hear a lot of buzzing around prompt engineering, but the way these tools are evolving, prompt engineering may not be the most important thing. Probably problem formulation is going to be a more important skill. So when we think about the skills that we're training our students for, and I think an English classroom is a wonderful place for that, we need to think about the future of these tools. And again, the sidebar chat, this is something that I am planning on doing. I haven't tried it yet, but I plan to incorporate one of my colleagues, Joel Glad, who I mentioned earlier, has worked with this. So I'd love to see your ideas for assignments. And while some of you are putting those in the chat, I know there'd been questions about citing. So I want to share, this will be on my last slide with my contact information, but what I just shared, Joel and I wrote a guide that's CC BY, so you could take it and use it today. It's kind of an introductory guide to students for how to use and cite and think about the ethics of AI. And then I'm sharing just a few of the other resources that I covered today too. So this last link right here is a link for teachers. It's problem formulation, Kelsey. So we want to think less about prompt engineering and more about problem formulation and how we can explain a problem in a way that's clear to the artificial intelligence. So it's predictive text, right? Like we could spend a lot of time talking about the framing of AI and how we've somehow embodied it like we tend to do and anthropomorphized it and how that might be dangerous. But anyway, that would be a separate presentation. Right now, I'm showing you how I use it. So let's see. Building an assignment where students will use Goblin tools to plan their project. Use generative AI to create something, write a reflection. Yes. So I love, Amanda, yes, I love the idea of the reflection on the process, right? And using Grammarly. And I love, yeah, this is just great. So those of you in the chat, Amanda had a great idea. And then in K-12, asking the AI to create passages in an author's style. My students have tried that. That's been very fun. Oh, thank you, Ash, for sharing the Goblin Tools link too. I'm going to add that to my list. So yeah, feel free to keep putting those in there, guys. I know we're getting close to time. So I just, thanks for letting me share my fun project. I think a lot about AI. I really, honestly, I find the experience somewhat pleasurable of working with artificial intelligence, if only because when it does lie and I call it on it, it says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're right." So that's a very useful feature and a tool that makes things up. But I hope you'll, if you came into this not knowing anything about artificial intelligence, the big takeaway here is not just that it can save you time, but that your students want your guidance. They know about this tool, they don't know how to use this tool, and they want you to lead them. And I feel like that's a very important role for all of us who are teachers, that we think about what we are really assessing and assigning to our students. So thank you all for sharing these great ideas. I have probably a minute for questions, and I can hang out for a little bit too, if that's okay, but I'd love to have any questions that you have. I'm loving all these ideas too, Mad Libs. Yes, Dahlia, did you have a question?
I was just looking for how can I raise my hand. I was looking for the hand raised, but thank you for being on top of this. I love your presentation. I'm gonna ask probably a very silly question. When we teach our students how to do all of that, how can we assure that the next time we ask them to write something, they're not just going to provide us with an AI written essay?
It's such a good question. And I kind of glossed over that part of my presentation, but especially in English literature, you have to be very creative, Dahlia. So in my class, I'm choosing texts right now that were written after 2021. The ChatGPT data set was trained on things prior to 2021. And so far, because that's not going to be a fix-all forever, students are not able to use ChatGPT to write the essay because it can't write that essay for them. But what it can do if they feed the poem in is give them some ideas and help them analyze. So the sad thing is there's no real way to know. So by setting the tone for your students right away and saying, we're going to use this ethically, we're going to cite, we're going to acknowledge, you won't get in any trouble. If I think you're using AI irresponsibly, you and I are going to have a conversation to make sure you know how to do that. And I've had 3 conversations this term out of 140 students where I'm fairly sure that they used AI irresponsibly. They've fessed up to it every time. And again, they've just wanted that guidance, right? To me, it goes back to the old days. Again, I'm old. Like, when we had Napster, right? Like we were all illegally file sharing, not because we wanted to illegally share music files, but because we just wanted easy access to the tools, right? So once we knew how to pay for it, we were all happy to pay iTunes or whatever. I think ChatGPT is similar. Like, if we set the ethics tone right away and say, we need you to cite this and use this ethically and responsibly. And then we have to explain to students, Dahlia, this is the why, right? Like, why do they need to learn this? Like, I just showed you how I'm writing because I think that might be the writing of the future. So why wouldn't I teach my students how to do that? If that makes sense. Right?
It does, and I do have a follow-up question if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of
I need
course.
to interrupt real quick. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
You are welcome to stay and continue the conversation, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to stop the recording here.
Thank you.